Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Digest. My name is Dan Lizette, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to another great episode, one that I'm very proud of, and mostly because I think you're really going to enjoy what you're about to hear. This week's guests are some of the newer podcasters, the independent podcasters. There are great shows to be heard, big and small, long established or brand new. These guys are two couples from Cincinnati, Ohio. It's called Couple Things Podcast, and what they're putting out there are something that I think anyone listening to this episode right now will enjoy. Maybe you're listening because you've already heard of them and you just want to hear more from them. That would be me. Or maybe you're listening because you like to find out about new great things to subscribe to. If that's you, you want to check out Couple Things Podcast. So, before we get to the show, though, just a quick reminder, guys, it's really important for shows like mine and shows like Couple Things and shows like all of the ones that I've featured on here, that if you enjoy them, take a few minutes, leave a rating on Stitcher or on iTunes. It really helps the show out so much, guys, and it is one simple way, it takes a minute or two of your time, to tell us that you like what we're doing and you want to hear more of it. So that's my mission for you guys for this week. The Podcast Digest has been a little stale on reviews here lately, and I hope that you are enjoying. So I'm going to ask you, if you've not done so already, please leave an iTunes review. With that said, on to this week's show with Couple Things Podcast. Folks, welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Digest. As I mentioned up front, this episode, I have got 4 guests. That's right, 2 couples from a little show called Couple Things Podcast. You guys may have heard of it, but if not, I want you to immediately search for that name in your catalog of choice. You will not regret doing so. The hosts are Ben, Molly, Michelle, and Ray, and I've got them all here with me right now. Guys, thanks for joining me on the Podcast Digest.
Hey, Dan. We're really pleased to be on the show with you.
Well, I'm really happy to have you guys. You guys are 2 couples who do a podcast together, but I don't want to tell folks what it's about. Folks who haven't heard your show yet, somebody give them a rundown of what Couple Things is all about.
Sure. We're never going to claim to be original in terms of our format and how we do it. What we do is essentially we're 4 best friends, 2 couples who have been going out and hanging out at bars for years, and one day we kind of decided it would be pretty fun to just put a couple microphones in front of us and make a podcast out of it. And essentially that's how it happened. You know, we sold it over drinks essentially to each other, and from there a Couple Things was kind of born. And it's each one of us will bring a random topic that we've thought of maybe that week, that day, and we'll all share a drink and discuss it together. So it's a barroom style discussion.
And that was Ray.
That was Ray.
I'm going to try to introduce everyone to each of your voices. And that way, when they hop over to you guys, they're going to know who each one of you are. So that was Ray. So let's go to Ben, just for fun. Ben, how did you guys originally meet? How did this whole foursome begin?
So it's a little bit of a lengthy story, but I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version. Molly and I
prefer the Podcast Digest version, but okay, go.
Oh, nice.
Shameless plug. So Molly and I actually met at Ball State University, dated, got married, etc., etc. When Molly and I were still in the dating process, she, as most women tend to do, did the friend interview, like, hey, you really need to meet my friend Michelle. And then she's going to tell me exactly what she thinks of you. So that's how I met Michelle originally. I met Ray a couple years later when Michelle was dating and brought Ray over. And we kind of did the 3-person interview on Ray.
I got grilled, that's for sure.
Yeah, like, what are your intentions here? Why are you so much taller than us? But yeah, that's how the 4 of us met, and then we all live in Cincinnati now, so we've spent a lot of time together. And Ray and I actually did a unpublished fantasy football podcast just to kind of get our wings under us, I guess.
Good reason why it was unpublished.
Yes, it was pretty terrible. And Ray over drinks one night was pitching the idea of Couple Things, and we all kind of had the consensus of, that's a horrible idea. No, that's ridiculous. But he eventually, as he tends to, wore us down. And a couple things was born.
And I've been a listener since the beginning, and I think what you guys are doing is absolutely wonderful. But when this whole thing was being assembled, and I'm going to forget, ladies, remind me which one of you was the most resistant to this idea.
Michelle.
Michelle. Tell me, Michelle.
Listeners know, Vonnie.
Vonnie. Michelle, tell me, what was your hesitation and what finally got you over the hump to join this party?
Well, so Ray has a track record of coming up with some pretty insane ideas. I've learned that in the 5 years that we've been together. And so we're sitting at dinner and Ray goes, so guys, I'm thinking about, like, what if we did a podcast? And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what if we did a podcast? Like, I listened to Stuff You Should Know primarily at the time, a little bit of Planet Money. Like, I listened to podcasts, but they were, like, big name podcasts. And Ray's saying, like, we should do a podcast, just us. And I'm like, who the hell is going to listen to us? So that was my main hesitation. I was like, it sounds like fun to do as friends, but really, who in the world is going to listen to us talk? Like, I just didn't get it.
But Molly, you were all in on this from the beginning. You thought this was a great idea?
I had some hesitation.
Yeah.
Kind of like Vonnie did, because I was like, who wants to hear me talk? Nobody, except for you guys, which is why you're my friends. But Ray, like Ben said, wore us all down, the kind of know-it-all of our group, and was like, listen, everyone is going to love it. Just try an episode. If you hate it, we won't do it again, but I think you should try it. And bam, I was hooked. I was like, all right, let's do it again tomorrow. Like, do we have more to talk about?
You would think they would listen to me more often, as I've been right about this the whole time, but...
I think this has been the only thing you've actually been right about, though.
Probably.
So, I don't know.
So this can go out to anyone but Ray. Considering the success of Couple Things so far, how insufferable has he been since this has been going good?
Surprisingly, because Ray is generally an insufferable person. He has not been insufferable at all. There's been no, like rubbing our faces in it or anything.
The girls
like
are
that.
going to completely disagree with me.
I am completely disagreeing. Ray is a numbers guy, so every week at our little podcast meetings, guys, our numbers. I've been looking at our numbers all week. I think we need to talk about some things. I'm like, come on, man.
Monday was definitely higher than Tuesday, but it's okay, because Monday's usually a low day.
Yeah, are you guys going to tweet more or what?
So this is run like its own little company here, right? There's like everybody has a role and a job. You guys had a recent appearance on Podcasts Without Borders. We all love Aaron and Dave, and you guys talked about how you've all got sort of your own roles. So I don't want to rehash those because I know a lot of people have heard Podcasts Without Borders, and if you haven't, go check them out. But I want to know, how was this decided who did what? What was the thought process there?
Well, I kind of feel like we played to our strengths. So, like, Malls is really into social media, so she was the clear choice to do, like, Instagram and eventually Twitter. Twitter was originally Ben's, but that didn't work out quite as well.
As a sales guy, I sold that responsibility to Molly while still maintaining the idea that I'm actually managing the social media accounts.
Yeah.
He's just the manager now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm overseeing social media operations.
When it came to editing, I mean, Ray really is the strength in that category. None of us know how to edit, and Ray had dabbled in it before, so he was obviously the clear choice when it came to that realm.
Yeah, and Ray had the most interest, too. Like, as we said, this was his idea originally, and editing is by far and away the most involved responsibility. So he kind of took that on as the person who had pitched the podcast. And then as the person who was the least committed, I took Facebook.
And how's that been going for you, Michelle?
I think it's been going very well.
You're very proud of your contribution over on Facebook.
I make my one post a week to advertise the new episode, and it's great.
Well, I feel like Twitter and Instagram originally became mine, because when we're just actually friends and go out, I'm kind of the PR of the group. I like to check us in and make the statuses, because I think it's fun.
Yeah.
So it only made sense.
But I have to tell you, Dan, Molly for the longest time was vehemently opposed to Twitter in every way, shape, and form.
That's because you lived on Twitter in every way, shape, and form.
So Molly, again, is like, no, I don't want to do Twitter. It's a pain. Da-da-da-da-da. So finally she got the login credentials for it, and 24 hours later, everybody's tweeting us and, like, there's all these interactions and, like, hashtags and @ signs and all this crazy stuff. Like, welcome to the Twitter world, honey. We've missed you.
She essentially got her Twitter feet under her that first day.
Yes.
Well, that was probably a good initiation. It sounds like something that she probably got acquainted to pretty quickly.
I think it's been going well.
While we're talking about social media, this is something I usually bring up a little bit later, but since we're on the social media subject, what has the reception been like, and how surprised, or in Ray's case, not surprised, have you been about the reception to the show?
I would say we've been extremely surprised. When we went into this podcast originally, we were A, just trialing it out, and B, we were doing it for fun. We thought it would just be a good reason for the four of us to get together every week.
The original goal that I pitched them, like the night of the initiation of the podcast, was essentially, if we can get 50 followers in the first 6 months, I consider that a win and a success for us. And we should be proud to have 50 people actually wanting to listen to us talk.
And I believe within the first month, we had over 200 followers.
Something close to it.
People were listening to the show, and I think we were all rather caught off guard that we had anybody listening to the show.
I mean, Miles is going to talk most about this, but I think the response from the podcast community as a whole has been unbelievable in accepting a brand new type of podcast out there that, doesn't know the play button from the pause button hardly. But, in terms of just support and people answering questions when I have them about editing, or, retweeting Malls after she tells everybody, hey, episode 6 just published, go listen or tell your friends, and you get 10 retweets of that. It's pretty awesome.
I'll tell you what, though, and I'm guilty of this too, of the self-deprecating and the humbleness. But I'll tell you, I listen to a lot of podcasts, right? That's sort of my shtick. What you guys did completely different, and what made you guys stand out from the crowd. And you've heard these shows. I know you listen to these shows. I listen to these shows. There are so many that are clearly hit the button and ramble for X amount of time, publish, and it's what it is what it is. That's not you guys. You guys came in out of the gate. You had great intro music. You had great artwork. You had an established format. You had the rapport in place. And I think that more than anything else is what stood you guys apart, because all those things that so often take so much time to accomplish or achieve, you guys had this out of the gate. And I think that has a lot to do with why you guys have seen the success that you have. I mean, talk to me about getting all those pieces in place. Like, for somebody who hadn't done it, short of fantasy football, unpublished, how did you guys know? Is it because you were listeners? Because did you have just a good idea, or was this just Ray being the genius?
I'm liking Dan right now, by the way, guys. He has got on the ball.
I think for us, because we all listened to, or started listening at least before we got into this really heavily, to so many other podcasts that we kind of aspired to be, we had this idea in our head of a very kind of, not regimented, but very organized structure of how we wanted the podcast to be set. Because that's kind of the overarching theme of a good podcast, is you notice these small elements that build it into a bigger, better product, like good intro music or a somewhat of a structure, good production. Those are the kind of things that, when we were hearing these in the podcast that we were listening to before, we said we have to have these kind of things in our podcast if we want to be taken seriously.
The other part is we went a month of doing, Ben and I, like we said, had tried talking in front of a microphone before. The content may not have been good, but Ben and I pretty much got comfortable talking into a microphone, into a computer, and then making a podcast out of it. The girls kind of hadn't been introduced to that. So we took pretty much a month from when I pitched it to the first time we published. And we shot maybe 8 or 9 prequel sequels episodes that, are never going to see the light of day because, there was a lot of kinks to work out. I would go back and listen. I would practice editing on those early ones just to, get my feet wet. And when we did all of that, and the other thing is Molly and Ben took off running when we, finally decided we wanted to do this, and went and talked to their best friends who have the band that is our intro music, got them to give us some really great clips, and we selected the best one that we thought for the intro. And it's worked out really well just in terms of the timing of everything and the practice, and it all paid off.
Yeah, we're lucky enough to have very talented friends who are good at things that we're
exactly.
not. So, Dear Lincoln, for example, recorded our intro music for us. Eric Furry, specifically. Our friend Matt Houston does great graphics work and just nailed the logo design for us. So we got very, very lucky there that they were able to supply us, quality elements for our podcast.
And they were also willing to support us. I mean, even off the bat, when they haven't even heard the show, they were willing to make us multiple different tracks to pick from and multiple different logos to pick from.
No, Eric's still billing us. Have you not been getting the invoices?
And who can tell me about the show title choice? Because it plays in so many different ways, and it comes up. I did it in the Skype chat before we started today. Who came up with that? Because I think it was a great idea.
It was kind of funny. I don't even remember exactly when we came up with it, but we probably were sitting around drinking, and we were like, okay, so we're really going to do this podcast thing. I guess we need a name. And
I think I pitched like 3 or 4, and then we made this out of those 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think we wanted to play on the fact that it was like a discussion podcast, like barroom style conversations. When we first thought of this, we were actually thinking about, well, at least I was thinking about How I Met Your Mother, and how they always had those amazing barroom debates over things like the most popular American food. Is it bread, or is it hot dogs, or is it pizza? And we wanted something like that, where we would debate things that, that we were fascinated by in the world. But we also wanted to play on the fact that we were 2 couples, because we thought that was pretty unique. And somewhere out of somewhere came couple things.
We originally worked through the names. We had like one thing. We're like, no, that's not going to work. And then it was 3 things, and we're like, no, that's not going to work either. 4 things. No, we got to scrap it. We eventually settled on couple things. It just made more sense that way.
And you know what I think makes a great show name, and this is why I think it's such a great show name. Now when I hear it and I see it on Twitter, it's like, it makes complete sense. It's like, oh, it was so obvious, right? I mean, looking at what you guys do with 2 couples and you talk about different things, it's like, it's the perfect name as far as I'm concerned. I think you guys stole it from anybody else who could think of this in the future and now can't take it because you got the website, the Twitter account, and so on and so forth. You guys got it on lockdown. I can't believe nobody else had thought of that beforehand, because it's an ingenious name as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, we probably really need to trademark that before like a dating site steals it.
I really do remember after we came home on deciding it. I don't remember when we decided it, but I remember coming home and Google searching the hell out of that, trying to find anything and everything that could possibly use it already.
Well, Ray's completely correct. Before we had even recorded an episode, we had an Instagram, a Twitter, a Facebook, and a website.
Yeah.
I remember that night, actually. We were sitting around the table, and we literally hadn't even recorded a full version of what our podcast would be. And we're all drinking, and Ray's like, let's make a website, let's make an email, let's make an Instagram. And like, I don't even remember how it happened, but we all got really into it. And then all of a sudden we had everything.
We were just spending money left and right already without anything to show.
We had everything we needed, all the essentials, except for the actual podcast.
And I can completely appreciate that story, because by myself, I went through exactly the same process. This show title came up because a couple others I would have preferred weren't available. And before I locked it in, I searched it on Twitter. I searched it on, the Gmail, make sure the Gmail account was there. And if it wasn't, I would have kept looking, because, you got to have that brand identity, if you will.
Exactly.
And, yeah, that helps. And when you talk about having friends that help out so much, I mean, I guess I would call him a friend, but I mean, I had another podcaster from That'll Play, Matt Candela, design my logo for me, and I think that in and of itself completely changed the direction of my show, because, it's such a visual representation of what I do, and without that, I look like a hack, and now at least visually I don't.
Yeah, I feel like artwork can really change the way you appear. I mean, it appears everywhere. It's on iTunes. It's on every platform where people listen to podcasts. And if it looks really good, then I think that in itself can really elevate whatever you're doing.
I really wish, though, that you had a graphical representation of your sultry voice.
Well, what can I do? I'll have to reach back out to Matt at That'll Play and see what he could come up with, Let me ask you about these topics, you guys. You guys mentioned it's formatted, and that is, immediately what I took to, because it's like you said, it's like a barroom discussion. It's kind of going around the table and everybody has their topic or question for the group. How do you guys go about picking this? Is this like a solely individual process? I know you guys tell each other to some degree beforehand because you have information ready, but what's that process like throughout a week?
Well, it's a little different for everybody.
Sure is.
So as the gung-ho person, I literally have a list of probably 30 to 40 things that I could bring up as a topic, and it just kind of plays on whatever I feel like that day.
Every week, Ray goes, well, I got about 60 to pick from, so let me scroll through my list.
And then you got Michelle, who, oh, crap, we need a topic today. We're recording. And so then she's scrambling to go find one.
And then like 5 minutes before Molly and Ben arrive to record, I'm still like, Ray, I don't have a topic. What am I going to say?
I've done food like 6 times. I need something different.
Molly actually gets really stressed about her topic about 24 hours beforehand. So the 24 hours prior to the show is pretty much a continuous, okay, this is my topic. No, I don't like it anymore. What if it's stupid? Well, okay, this is my topic. Never mind, it's stupid.
I like to pick a topic that I feel everyone can contribute to, that everyone has a say in or an opinion, and I want it to be more fun, not like boring or, oh, my answer's cat.
I think
well, that was one of your topics early on.
That is true.
I think what we've learned throughout the process too, at least I feel like we've improved, is the types of questions we ask. So in the beginning, we were asking a lot of opinion questions like, tell me a story about something that happened to you when you were a kid, or what's your favorite something? And we realized that the podcasts were more fun when it was more banter and more discussion. So we've been trying to pick more like issues to debate or controversies where we know that we're going to have someone one side and some on the other, and we can really argue for our side.
I'm kind of inspired sometimes, just like when I'm driving down the road and someone cuts me off and he has an Alabama license plate, my first reaction is, who are the worst drivers out there in America right now? And that's literally a topic on my list that we might talk about one day. But it's really inspired by kind of everyday life.
Regrettably, the worst drivers in America are all around us right now.
And you guys are based out of Cincinnati, right?
Yes.
For anybody who doesn't know. So what is this? What's the timeline? Is it an hour before you hit record, you share each other's topics, or is it not?
It's a little bit closer, actually, to when we start the podcast. We typically will come over to our quote-unquote studio/basement to record. And we normally will bring it up about 20 minutes beforehand. I think because it gives us enough time to gather our thoughts, but not enough to the point where we've essentially talked the topic to death before it's time to actually record.
Right.
We tried doing it as soon as we pushed play. That did not work out very well because there's a lot of dead air.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it makes it fresh, too. So we haven't discussed it. So when I hear Ray or Michelle's side, I'm like, oh, I'm really interested because I didn't know what they were going to say.
And I want to hear about this because in the couple things history over the past several weeks, I've noticed this coming up more and more. I want to hear you guys talk about this, the aspect of save it for the podcast. How intrusive is this becoming?
Well, so this is Ray's shtick now. We'll be out to dinner or we'll be, hanging out at our house or having drinks, and Malls and I were having a really in-depth conversation, and all of a sudden here's Ray's voice. Stop talking. Save it for the podcast. So it's getting to the point where we're hanging out as friends and we can no longer have real-life conversations without someone, Ray, saying save it for the podcast.
I feel like every time we talk now, Ray is in my head because I talk to you every day, and in my head I'm like, should I tell her this now or should I tell her on the podcast? I don't know what to do.
We actually scheduled a weekend. What weekend is that?
2 weekends.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now to hang out just as friends, not talk about the podcast, and we can just talk about whatever we want.
I'm just going to say you're welcome, listeners, because it's fresh because of me.
Well, I'll say two things. I want to go to a weekend thing that you mentioned just there, Ben, but I'll say this. I have zero doubts that you guys need to actually actively save anything for the podcast. I actually feel like that is not an issue for you guys. I don't believe material will be a problem, or banter, or questions, or topics. I think that's kind of a unending flow at this point. And and what you need to do, Ray, is that if you need to get a little portable recorder, all right, even the voice memo app on your phone, right? If something starts to happen, just hit the button, lay your phone next to them, and just walk away, and then you can edit it in later.
So you can listen to all our conversations, and we can give you the nickname NSA Ray.
There you go. And Ray, when you come up and say, "Hey, no need to record this week, guys. Take a week off," then you just edit all their conversations together and you publish it.
Together 20 different conversations to make a great podcast.
Hey, there you go. Then you don't have to save it for the podcast anymore.
It's a good point, Dan.
It could work.
I have to think about this.
I am the ideas guy, Ray. So,
That's the truth.
I mentioned weekends. Speaking of ideas in weekends, you guys had a great idea. One of my favorite episodes was recorded in the freaking car. Okay? And
that was ridiculous.
I want to know what this was like. Okay, I kept hearing the big truck going by and all this stuff. One, who came up with this idea? And two, what was this like recording in a car?
I think actually Ray was the one that came up with the car idea.
Shocking.
Well, and Vaughn was adamantly opposed.
For safety reasons.
You can see why we married each other, can't you, Dan?
Absolutely. Lots in common.
But it was an interesting experience because normally when you're podcasting, you're focused on making sure your volume is okay. You're making sure that you're talking directly into the mic. This is a little bit different because you're sitting there and you're watching cars go by and you're watching Ray try not to hit other cars. And he's a really bad driver, man.
Come on.
Well, and it was hard because Ray was driving and he had a headset on, so he was good. But then Malls and Ben and I were all holding our microphones. And usually we have stands, so we just kind of sit in front of it. But here we are trying to hold our microphones, and we're all trying to hold it the exact same distance from our mouths the entire podcast, and the car is bumping along, and everything's going everywhere, and I've got a computer on my lap, and Ben's got one on his lap, and Malls is trying to take notes.
And then I'm like, oh, look, a cow.
Squirrel.
I'll tell you this. I'm going to have to go another 6 months before we do an episode like that again, because that was an absolute nightmare to go through and edit.
I was going to say, do you recommend anyone to try this?
Yes.
Yes?
Just once, though.
Just
Don't
once.
do it again afterwards.
As long as you have a sound disclaimer.
And you know what? It didn't sound bad at all. Honestly, you guys kept talking about it. And I think, Ray, you even put something up front, I think, as something happened with your mic or something later on. And I was listening for it, and I couldn't even find that. And it sounded great as far as I'm concerned. It came out really good in the end.
It pretty much doubled my production time on trying to make sure this podcast sounded good because I had to go in and I won't get technical, but I took out a hum that was throughout. We bargain basement mics are kind of what we're using right now, and that was what we recorded with. So they kind of picked up everything that was going by. So it was a lot of just nitpicking probably on my part. But, one of my goals from the beginning has always been to try and have a good audio listen because I've been listening for years to podcasts, all of different qualities. I kind of feel like I have an ear for a good quality podcast, and my goal was to make sure that we were in that upper echelon of, amateur podcasts, but they sound decent.
I also think it speaks volumes to your skills that you've gained in editing, because I do feel like compared to some of the other podcasts we listen to that our quality is very high.
Right, and that was what I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about how you guys came out of the gates. That seems to me to have always been at least decent and only getting better, I think, as time goes on. And but speaking of editing, how much do you give the listeners at the end? Is this is your 47-minute episode condensed from a 2.5-hour conversation, or is this pretty much close to a raw edit?
Our goal from the beginning was to give me less work, let's be clear, but our goal from the beginning was literally to just let someone sit in like they were at the table with us and having this conversation. And everything that you hear is pretty much unedited. Every once in a while, there will be a snafu with one of the mics, and I'll have to take out 15 seconds here and there. But in all honesty, it's 47 minutes is literally how long we sat down and pressed the record button until we ended. And for the most part, I don't take anything out. I don't change anything of what people are saying. Sadly, that is how interesting sometimes we are to talk to, just because we just don't need that many edits, in my opinion.
And I think that's a good thing. I think it adds to the naturalness of the interaction between you guys to know that it's not artificially contrived, that the interaction and the playing off each other isn't done in editing, but rather it's done live. And I think that's important. I think that comes through.
Yeah, and I think it really helps us, too, to have a format. So we've really got it kind of down to a science where, we all have our timers in front of us. So we're all kind of keeping an eye on, like, we've been doing this topic for 10 minutes. We should, unless it's a really great topic and we're really rolling with it, we should probably think about moving on. And that kind of helps us stay on track and keeps it natural, too. Like, we obviously don't want to cut and splice our conversations because we want them to be real. And so this really kind of helps us stay under that hour mark, but keep it real.
There's also a lot of awkward hand gesturing that takes place so that we know when to wrap a topic up or to speed up or slow down. So that also kind of helps keep it organic, but still gives us the structure that we need.
We really try not to exhaust a topic, though, too. Like, we don't want to make every single point out there on whether or not a hot dog's a sandwich. We'll just go with one that pops in my mind. We want our listeners to be able to weigh in later. Like, Malls does a fantastic job going in later and like engaging our listeners and trying to figure out what they have to say. So leaving something unsaid sometimes works in our favor.
Yeah, and I'll make this suggestion. I actually made this suggestion on another, from the time you folks are hearing this, a future episode, so this may sound a little familiar, but I think you guys would be great for this format as well. Maybe on the website or what have you. There are so many easy, free poll tools that you could put on the website. In some of these debates you are having, like the hot dog sandwich thing, I'd love to see a poll put up on the website, and then the next episode you come back and give the poll results and just shove it in whoever's face who lost, based on the poll. I think that would be great. Not only does everybody then get to go see the website and see all the great stuff there, because these guys have pictures up here and little bios, and they've got all their episodes. The website, which, folks, couplethingspodcast.com, go check it out. But something like that to get people to go there, see all that stuff over there, and then you turn it back into kind of your intro section. Poll results, Ray loses again. Stuff like that.
I feel like that's actually a really great idea, Dan, because I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where, friends or family will call and they'll say, I wish I was at the table with you guys. I wanted to chime right in and be like, no, you are wrong. It's actually this. So that's actually a great idea.
Yeah, it's one way to get people involved and let Ray know he's wrong.
It's a common theme for the show.
Well, and it's really funny because my mom listens to our show, and she's in the habit now where she'll listen when it comes out, and she'll be texting me through the entire time she's listening, commenting on every topic that we've talked about with her own opinion. So it's totally true. Listeners love chiming in.
Oh, and I just thought of something else, too. You should screenshot those texts and tweet them out.
Awesome.
Mom's take episode this, the appropriate
idea,
ones, the appropriate ones. Let's see. Speaking of which, I had a question and I think I just lost it. I got diverted by my own ideas, so I want to go this one because I think this one will be fun because I've got a categorization which I'm brave enough to share, but I want you guys to do it to yourselves first. I think you guys all have distinctive voices and play almost roles in this conversation, this barroom conversation. What do you guys look at yourselves as sort of the role in this group or the role on the podcast? So, you could say comedian or you could say the serious one or whatever the case may be, but I want you to say it for yourselves. What do you consider as your own role in this group?
So I have mine immediately. I'm definitely, I would say, like the serious / mediator type, like just in the group and on the podcast. Like I always feel like I'm definitely the more neutral and the more serious one.
She's also our giggle track the entire time.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic since I am the giggle track. But as far as like topics that I like to bring up or like the kind of role that I play in the group, I definitely feel that way.
And that's Michelle, right?
Yeah.
I thought so. All right. Next up, Molly, go next.
She is lost.
Honestly, I feel like I might be the oddball of the group. I do not know where I fit in.
I'm gonna weigh in a little bit. I think Malls calls us out on shit. Like if we come out, if Ben, Michelle, or I come out with a really stupid point, she's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And at the same time, she's also fodder for Ben and I to pick on every once in a while.
I feel like I can be down. I don't know. I feel like I'm the oddball of our group. Sometimes I'm funny. Sometimes it's serious. Sometimes I call them out on their shit.
You're the wild card.
You're a Renaissance woman.
All right, Ben, yourself.
That's a tough one. I'd say maybe like the snarky a-hole kind of. I don't know. I guess I haven't really given it much thought.
I feel like Ray is more the a-hole
Yeah.
and you're the snarky.
Yeah, you're the comedian. Like
Yeah,
you
well-
have the one-liners. Like we it's not big for us yet, but we're doing Clamor, and it's this thing where I can do like 18 seconds of our podcast. I put it up. People can go listen to it, and then if they like it, they can go straight to iTunes and listen to us. I swear over half of our clamors is always Ben's like funny, witty comment from our show.
So together, we're the snarky a-hole. When our powers combine.
All right, Ray, what do you consider yourself?
I feel like I'm the contrarian. I sometimes take the contrarian viewpoint just for debate a lot of the time.
Sometimes?
Well, I mean, like this podcast coming out tomorrow / this past Tuesday when this comes out. You know, we had a topic come up that we all agreed on, but, you know, just for argument's sake and for discussion and for it to not end in 3 seconds after we brought up the topic, you know, I took kind of a contrarian viewpoint just so that we could discuss it.
Ray's a great example of his all guys are dicks.
Yes, I am. Assholes, actually. But anyway.
Whatever.
And I would say that I have that bravado of being right, but I'm usually not. So that's kind of how I would classify myself.
Well, now
Confidence is key.
I'm looking down at my notes now to see how well I did. All right, so I'm
What do
going to
you got?
tell you.
What you
I'm
said?
going to tell you what I had, which I was pretty close, I think. So from being a listener, all right, this is what I've come up with and why I think they are the distinctive voices that make what you guys produce each week very enjoyable. So Ben, I had you as the short man comedian. Okay, that was what my note has here. The reason I say that is because I have to, and I'm not sure if I told you guys, I think I remember saying this maybe to Ray or something. I fall into the Ray category of size. I'm 6'7", so I can sympathize with Ray on the height piece. You guys had a conversation about that at one point. So
I cannot go into New York without hitting everything
Yep.
in that city.
You've probably been like me. We probably have partial brain damage from growing up and hitting our heads on every car door, getting into cars, walking through doorways, you name it. I've done it.
I'm going to blame my personality on the brain damage. Yes,
There you
thank
go.
Dan.
I've done it. You can do it too. So, Ray, I had you as the big guy and a little bit of a goofball. So that's what I had as the note for you.
That's spot on, I think.
All right, Malls, I had you, and I don't even know if you intend this or what, but I think, honestly, it's the tone of your voice has a great sarcastic tone to it all the time, and I always think you have the best sarcastic takes in these conversations. I don't even know if you intend it half the time, but when you say it, I'm just start laughing because I think it's just so great the way you will pitch things. And Michelle, I had you almost dead on. My note says the most level-headed negotiator in the group.
So true.
Yes. So
Dan, I feel like you were spot on with my character in real life outside of this podcast.
I feel like Dan just proved that he actually has listened to our podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Well done, Dan.
oh yeah, I've been a listener since the beginning. I think I found you guys episode 4 or 5 somewhere in there, and then immediately I went back to the beginning and have been following ever since. So
Yeah, you nailed it.
I try. Speaking of things that are on the show all the time, this came up in a previous interview I did as well about, I think it was a couple weeks ago when I talked with Jonathan Hirsch from Arrivals, and I had this way too long a conversation with him about how he ends the show. He's got this sort of sign-off that he does at the end of each episode, and I've been constantly looking for this kind of thing inside every episode, and I think you guys actually have it, which is this calling out of whenever you add the explicit tag. One, how did that start? And is this done intentionally? Because I think that was your most recent, as of right now, 16. And folks, it'll be more when you're hearing this. But I don't think I heard it on 16.
So we actually, when we first published, didn't think we had gotten the explicit rating because we were very kind of clean. I don't think we really cursed or anything. And when it got published on iTunes, we had an explicit rating. And we were kind of offended. We thought we were really effing nice in that podcast. Why would they put that on there? So now it's just kind of our thing that we point out. If they're going to give us the explicit tag, we might as well earn it.
You know, a lot of people give us feedback on Twitter, and they say, we just wish you guys would just flat out just cuss. Just drop the F-bomb. It's okay. But now it's kind of a game. It's kind of fun in a way.
We're making it into a drinking game to find the explicit rating in our show. I think when I was first publishing our very first episode, I read up as much as I could on publishing and episodes and then the explicit rating with iTunes. And they had mentioned in their guidelines that it should be kind of equal throughout all of your shows. If you're going to be explicit in some shows, it's probably a good idea to just warn everybody so that someone doesn't start pushing play and listen through 10 of your episodes and 3 of those are explicit and you say that, but they thought it wasn't initially. So I kind of marked this as potentially an explicit episode or show. And I also kind of quantified it by the fact that we're always drinking. We are constantly drinking. We'll bring up our drinks. We'll make drunk comments. I just kind of figured I didn't want a soccer mom to be driving home with their kid and be like, I can't believe I'm letting my kid listen to this.
Yes, not a kid's show, folks. Not a kid's show.
My coworkers actually have started listening, and I'm just like, oh no, oh no.
Well, it was funny because we saw the explicit rating come up on some of our episodes. And so I went online and tried to figure out what the explicit rating actually meant on iTunes. And once I read the explanation, I totally understood because I went back to our first episode where we talk a lot about bathroom etiquette and we do say a couple shits. and I was like, oh yeah, okay, now I get it. We're a little explicit. And then from there on out, it was just funny because every time the first person cursed, oh, there's our explicit rating. And now it's just a game. It's like a joke.
But we should try to do a really clean episode where it's all just shucks and gee willikers.
Oh, definitely. And then right at the end, it should be first non-explicit tagged episode. No, in fact, hey, another idea. I have so many ideas for other people's shows. If I could do this with my own show, it'd be great. You guys could totally have a giveaway. After 25 episodes, somebody email you the timestamp when you call out the explicit rating on all your episodes. Just send you an email with the timestamp of whenever the explicit comes up.
That's a great idea.
Dan, I'm going to give you credit, but this is something I've literally thought about and not brought up to the group yet because I don't want to inundate them with all of my ideas.
Of course.
I feel like we should be paying Dan for his time right now. He has all these good ideas.
This is what happens for people over 6 feet, right, Ray?
Yeah. We're on the same wavelength, Dan. We can see the same horizon.
Absolutely. That's how it works. Okay, let me ask this one. Go around the room. Personally, best thing that has happened so far, a story, an incident, a benefit, best thing that's happened so far because you guys have started this show. Whoever can start.
So I think the one for me that really kind of stood out was actually the letter that we got from Podcasts Without Borders. They actually wrote us a really nice handwritten letter, which you don't really get anymore. And just said, we love your guys' show. We're really big fans. You brighten our day, when we listen to your show and when we get to download. And just to actually see that somebody put in that much effort to tell us that we had a positive impact on their day, it's really nice to know that you can bring somebody a little bit of joy. So I think that was a big one for me.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And they sent us really cool stuff.
Yeah, Canadian Smarties.
Yep.
These are delicious.
So the one for me that I think I've brought up on the podcast before, but maybe just in chatting is even just within our own friend group, especially me and Ben, I feel like we kind of met as significant others, not as friends of, friends. And through this podcast, I feel like I've learned so much about Ben.
I think you might be my long-lost sister.
I know.
Strong possibility.
If there's a theme to the show, it's finding the moment when Ben and Michelle look at each other and go, podcast married.
I was going to bring that up, yes. That's that in the explicit.
I feel like we've learned a lot about each other doing this podcast, which I really love. But I especially enjoyed it with Ben because I feel like we didn't really know each other as well until we did the podcast, and I felt like it's brought us all closer.
We just high-fived.
Nice.
I feel like generally it's brought us all way closer. It gives us a reason to hang out every week too. But I think for me, it's gotten me actually fully into podcasting. Before I just listened to Stuff You Should Know or, you know, the pretty broad ones like Serial, the big name ones out there. But now that we've gotten into this little niche of a different podcast community, like Podcasts Without Borders, and even you, Dan, that's how I found you, was through Twitter. Really found a lot of great podcasts out there. And through your show, I found Illusionists and Nocturne, which are two of my favorite shows right now.
Yes.
I've binge listened to all of them. I'm just like waiting for Helen to bring out a new episode.
Yes, she is awesome.
I would say for me, that's been huge. I'm really into podcasts, different podcasts, and thanks to this, it's gotten me there.
For me, I've kind of got two small ones. One is like when I talk to some of my really close friends from back at home, they make the comment pretty often and pretty frequently of like, it feels like we're sitting in the car next to them having a conversation when they're driving, you know, to work or to a job. And, you know, they just want to chime in, or they'll text me like Michelle's mom will to her, just kind of an answer of like whether cold pizza is the best item to eat for the rest of your life or not, you know, that sort of thing. And the other one is us four. Like we've all kind of touched on it, I think, so far. It's an excuse no matter what that we have to get together. And it's not even a have to. It's a joy to be able to sit down. The fact is, like, I think we could do this podcast, you know, Ben and Molly at home, Michelle and I at our house, do it over, you know, Google Hangout or Skype or whatever it is. And I'm not besmirching any other podcast that does that, but being able to sit in the room with these guys, share a drink, you know, laugh our asses off over something that I say that's completely off base, it is a real something that I look forward to every week. Like when we don't podcast, it's like a hole in my week.
It's like a big withdrawal. How have I not seen you in 2 weeks? We have to podcast.
Plus, I always think I'm going to forget how to set everything up because, you know.
But we had that span where we actually weren't able to podcast for a week, and we came back, and it was a disaster. We butchered the intro like 5 times. None of us could talk.
Well, and I think the other thing I would say, too, is one of my pet peeves that I know I've talked about on the podcast is the fact that interaction between people just doesn't really happen much anymore. You know, everyone's glued to their phones or glued to their screens, and you go out to dinner and you stare at people. And I love that we're bringing all of these like really thoughtful topics to the table, and we're actually talking about them when we're engaging people and engaging each other. And that's something I realized that I missed when we started this. I was like, I love talking about all of these things with you guys, with everyone, and it's like an outlet for that.
That's one of the things we talked about. Like early on, we said when we brought up a topic and we're talking on the show, we didn't want our smartphone to be on the table for us to look up the answer. We wanted to have a true barroom style debate where nobody knew the answer for sure. It was just more of an opinionated poll question between really good friends.
So everybody is obviously enjoying this ride that you guys are on with Couple Things. And obviously, I hope, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this who have now gone to couplethingspodcast.com, subscribed, and followed on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Right, guys? Done. Check. Okay. Hope that this goes on for a very long time. But have any of you had a thought to add something else to the mix? Like maybe your own show or a sister show or anything like that? I mean, I've had the thought, crazy as it may be, of starting another one, although I'm staying away for now. But have any of you thought, you know, hey, I have this other night of the week. Maybe I could join up with somebody else and start something new, not to leave Couple Things, but in addition?
I have not considered leaving Couple Things because I individually am not that interesting. So I've got a good thing going here.
And it's actually funny, even just finding an hour a week, I feel like is always a struggle for us. We're so busy. And so, no, that has never crossed my mind.
I've kind of pitched it But no.
Of course you've pitched it.
But no, there wasn't a lot of draw to the ideas that I had thrown out on the table. And, again, this is going to be our 17th episode coming out this past Tuesday. And it's almost criminal kind of how easy this is for us to do. Like anybody, I'm going to just go out on a limb. Anybody out there who's even got an inkling of doing podcasting, go do it. You're in the right spot for one thing. You're listening to Dan, who's going to highlight some of the best shows out there besides ours. And, if it's so simple to set everything up and to do, it takes maybe a little bit more effort to make a quality show, but you can learn that by the time, you have a show format down in a lot of ways. And, I might spend a few hours on production, but it's a few hours I really enjoy doing. Like, it's something I look forward to each week, actually getting to edit a show. It's something that a lot of people, I think, could learn, too, if they took the time to just try it.
Well, actually, I redact my previous answer. I've been meaning to talk to you, Ray, about our death metal podcast.
Yeah. We've never listened to death metal, either one of us, but we're doing a podcast on it.
I think that would be a great podcast thing to do. Like, wow, they're really mad. Like, they're really mad.
Well, I'm thinking from a branding aspect. You guys have, the bet has been made here, right? So I'm thinking couple sports, okay, couple movies, right? Yeah, couple TV shows, right? You guys could go to all the different genres and just couple it.
Dan, what do you bill hourly? I want all your ideas. I want every last one.
You could have a couple network. You just have a whole suite of shows publishing. And
we're talking about things in the future. We really are. It's right now we're taking it one step at a time. Our summer is fairly hectic for both of us. Michelle and I especially. So right now, finding time to truly do the podcast and do it justice is taxing. But I feel like if we finally get a groove going, there is, potential for us one day to talk about Ben and I starting to do our fantasy show again, because we enjoyed it. I mean, talking fantasy sports is one of my favorite things to do, and I dragged Ben into this world a few years ago, and he's probably, still upset at me about that, but he enjoys it, I think.
I love it.
Well,
I like to bring Ray down to earth and just remind him that we're a baby podcast. We're brand new, 17 episodes compared to any other show is nothing really.
No,
so I feel
absolutely.
Like, and maybe after, a year goes by and if we're still gathering traction and gathering followers, then we would see where we're at. But I love this podcast. I'm not even thinking about another podcast.
So
You're the only podcast that means anything to me, baby.
So on the topic of this podcast, couple things for the future, for the next 5, 10, 20 episodes, finishing out that first year you guys were just talking about. Any changes we can expect? Have you guys thought about, more topics, less topics, publishing more or less, or guests, or format changes? Any thoughts?
So we have a few changes, ideas kind of in the works, and one of them is actually with Dear Lincoln, the band that we spoke about who does our intro song. Mm-hmm. Coming up in the early fall, you can look forward to 2 bonus episodes coming from us, and one will be a concert format. So the band will be coming in town and putting on a live show for our listeners so they can get a feel for their music, their songs. They write all of their own stuff. And then on top of that, we'll be doing a crossover episode, and they will actually probably be the first guests on the show. So they will be presenting topics, and we will all discuss it just like we do currently, barroom style. So we have that in the works. Besides that, we've been polling Twitter. Vonnie's going to be going to New York for some vegan stuff, so we might have...
#vegan.
Yes, #vegan. A few topics from some Twitter listeners, which we really appreciate all the feedback that they do give us. A lot of them have some great questions that have been presented, so...
Something that I've kicked around with the group, and I think it might be like the 1-year anniversary sort of thing, to try and do a live show, to try to go to like one of our favorite pubs downtown in over the Rhine, which is the area where like all the up and coming bars are in Cincinnati. Trying to find one, beer house that's willing to let us come on a Thursday and shoot a live podcast there. That would be so cool, I think, for all of us just to be able to sit down and really say, we're doing a podcast live.
Barroom style, literally.
Barroom style, in a bar.
In a bar.
No, actually, that show we are not doing barroom style. It's monologues only.
Spoken word, poetry. Well, that's great. And those are some great things. And I think that you guys, knowing how much forethought you put into the launch of this, I know that you guys are constantly thinking about ways to make things better and improve and grow the show, as I hope that it does. And I hope that it does from appearing here. So anybody who's not taken my advice yet, somebody tell them where they can find All Things Couple Things.
So obviously you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Stitcher, TuneIn, and also SoundCloud. We're under Couple Things Podcast for all 4 of those. As for social media, you can find us on Twitter at Couple Things Pod, and Facebook and Instagram, we're on there as well, and that's under Couple Things Podcast. And obviously our website, which Dan mentioned earlier, which is couplethingspodcast.com. And thanks to you, Dan, for obviously having us on, and even asking us on was a huge deal for us. We honestly couldn't believe it, so thank you for that.
Again, charity cases are always appreciated like this.
When you asked us to be on the show, there was a massive group text going around where we were all freaking out.
Well, I appreciate that, although I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary. Like I've said since the beginning of the Podcast Digest, I want to tell people about the things that I enjoy, that I think are great shows, that I think should be in your subscription list. And Couple Things is definitely one that's in mine. It should be in yours, folks. Trust me on this one. Give it a shot. Ben, Molly, Michelle, Ray, thank you guys so much for the time.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
And folks, that'll do it for this week of the Podcast Digest. Thank you so much for listening. Come back again next week, won't you? There will be another great interview for you. Until then, my name's Dan Lizette with the Podcast Digest. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Podcast Digest. You can follow the show on Twitter at PodDigest. Like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Podcast Digest. Email the show feedback at thepodcastdigest@gmail.com. And you can find all the previous episodes and exclusive blog entries at the show's website, thepodcastdigest.info.